everybody, and welcome to Uncap the podcast with Lerato. I am Lerato, and as you can see, today I am not alone. I am with one of the most special people I have met in the past few years. So her name is Karabo, but I'm going to let her introduce herself. So in today's topic, I want to show you guys how faith is exercised. And Karabo is a phenomenal lady, and I think her life story is what actually emphasizes that for me, in my opinion. So, Karabo, hi.
Hi, Lerato. Hi, everyone.
Welcome to Uncap the podcast. Guys, she is my very first guest. As you know, if you've been following, I've never had a guest.
No pressure.
Yeah,
Sure.
I've never had a guest, so she's my very first one. And yeah, hello, ma'am.
Hi. Hi, ma'am.
How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Karabo, tell us, who are you? Who's Karabo Maluleke?
Yo, that's a loaded question if there ever was one. I'm so many things. Okay, so my name is Karabo Maduleke. I am a 34-year-old beloved daughter of Christ. I am sold out for Jesus, like obsessed, really. Because he found me, he saw me, he saved me, he loved me in a way that nothing else could ever make sense. You know, in a time that I needed a savior the most, I just really had a beautiful radical encounter with Christ, and it really just changed my life. And as a result of that, my life is just to serve and glorify his name in different ways. So first and foremost, I am a creative. I love creating things. I think I was born with this gift. I've always seen life in color. You know, I love beautiful things. I took art in school, but I never really believed in the gift until 5 years ago. And this gift was activated when my mother and sister and I said yes to a call and a mandate. And we said we want to start an organization, you know, open a non-profit organization. At the time, that was predominantly helping women by empowering them with skills, giving them knowledge, free skills and free knowledge, you know. And between my mom and sister and I, no one had marketing skills. None of us actually had. Between the three of us, all we have is a matric, believe it or not. So I felt like it fell on me because Mama didn't have WhatsApp, Harmony didn't have WhatsApp, they didn't know anything about social media. You know, I was the only one who was a social butterfly at the time. So I was like, okay, it's fine, I'll take this, because we needed to market the organization, right? We needed people to know about what we do. And the best way to do that was on social media. So I took that on, and little did I know it would be a rabbit hole of God just really helping me discover my gifts, more of them, my identity, you know. And I took that on with so much passion, that responsibility. And it opened up so much. So today I am a business owner of a digital marketing company because of that seed of faithfulness. Even when I didn't know, you know, I understand. I mean, I didn't go to school for it. It was just Holy Spirit matured all the way. But I also had a drive and a desire to mature it. And God really just made me there. And he developed it into something far bigger than I could ever imagine. You know, so I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm also a co-founder of an NPO, a non-profit organization with my mom and my sister. And that is also just another journey and experience and a roller coaster, really, that God has took us on for the last 5 years. Our organization turned 5 this month, on the 6th of April. And it's been quite a journey, you know, being part of an organization that changes people's life, like on ground level, you know, not just from a pulpit, but literally we see the realities of people on a daily basis, and having that interaction and that relatability with people, hearing their struggles, walking with them in their pain, and being a, you know, a hope or a beacon of hope or inspiration in their lives has literally been the most significant thing I've ever been a part of, and has really just made me see the world in such a different lens. I'm also a teacher, a Bible teacher.
Yeah.
So I love Jesus. I'm sure you heard me tell you that. And because I love him, I also want to know him. And the last 5 years has also been me just learning God, learning the character of God, learning the heart of God. You know, even till today, I still want to learn and grow. And I really, really, really love and enjoy learning. And everything that I learn, I always want to teach, you know, because freely I was given and freely I want to give back. So anytime that I'm put in a position or given a platform to share anything that God has taught me, I am like all there, hands down. And I'm also a Sunday school or a children's discipleship ministry leader at church. So I recently just discovered that I have a call for children. I didn't know that. I would have never chosen that. This is how you know that your calling is not something you would ever choose for yourself.
Definitely.
Because children was not even a thought for me. But as I step into that call every day more and more, it just makes sense. You know, it just sits so well. It makes me happy, and I see that impact, and I see that the fruits of that every time that I am put in spaces where I minister and teach children, you know, and it's one of my favorite things now. What else? Oh, I'm a creative. I think I did mention that. Yeah? So I'm learning art, prophetic art to be specific. It's something that God is really still trying to refine in me. Oh, and I'm also a spiritual counselor in training. So I really also have a heart for helping people heal, because I had a very traumatic upbringing that left me really scarred and wounded. So I have a burden for people who have either experienced the same traumas as me, you know, or are battling mental wounds, and I want to help them walk that journey of healing and deliverance, because I wish that somebody could have done that for me. I mean, God did it, obviously, but now I know that I want to help people walk on their journey of healing. And yeah, I think I'll stop there for now. It could go on and on and on.
You might have heard how remarkable this lady is, and she did say that she wears many hats, and this is actually just only a few. And I, by the grace and the mercy of God, have been provided an opportunity to actually see her in motion. You know, she mentioned that she runs a foundation with her family. You know, that foundation is BBM Foundation. It's Basadi Ba Moshito Foundation in Centurion. It has grown immensely. So I met these ladies about 2 years ago.
Can you believe it?
I can't believe it. I can't believe it was 2 years ago. So we met in church. Okay. And so I started going to Fellowship City.
Yeah.
And then they would sit at a specific area all the time. And so I would just sit shortly right behind them, maybe like 2 seats or 3 rows behind them. And something about them drew me to them. Like, I felt an intense love for them. It was a whole family. I was like, man, I love this family. And out of nowhere, we started greeting each other as people would politely. And then it graduated to giving hugs. And oh my goodness, how was your weekend? Yeah. And then there was a time where I felt, because by now, you must have noticed that I speak a lot. So when I'm nervous, it's intensified. And so I saw Karabo and I was like, no, man, you guys say you love me and you miss me every single time. However, we don't have each other's contacts. So that can't be right. Yeah. And we exchanged each other's numbers. And then that's when the journey started. And they started inviting me to most of the things that they do, because they do a lot for the community. They go places, they meet people, they help wherever they can with so many things, you know. So I became part of that. And because I had time in my hands, I always wanted to go wherever they had invited me. And so having been there, I noticed how they work, what they do. And let me tell you, when I tell you that God was showing me what faith looks like with them, because at that time in my life, I was struggling with actually believing that the things that God says about my life are actually real. So I wasn't trusting. I was very timid, afraid to step out and all those things. And God was showing me what happens when we have faith. And so they were that embarking story of illuminating what faith actually looks like in action. All of them, mom, the sister, even the kids, because her sister Harmony has 2 girls and they are also in it within the family business, and just watching them take people in and make them feel like family, it is really, really one remarkable thing. They really do have big hearts and they've done so much. But Karabo, I want you to take me more into your personal story, right? Outside of BBM. And I know that, like you said, it was a journey, like you've gone through some certain things, but how did God get you to a point of faith? Like, when did you decide that you're going to follow Jesus and be as intensified as you are about your faith? You know, like you said, that you love Jesus and you're not even compromising. Like, she doesn't compromise.
No.
So when did we get there? Where did Jesus find you? How did he reach you? And when did you decide that you're relenting to his love and pursuit for you?
Yeah, so we grew up in a Christian home, you know, as most of us do. My mom was, it still is, a God-fearing woman of God, and she taught us that from a very young age. So I was born into a broken home. My mom was abused by my father. And at the time, so my older sister was born, well, she had a happy marriage, right? So when she was born, I think they were married for 3 years at the time, and she was the firstborn, and it was a happy experience, you know, celebrating the first birth. And then I came 3 years later, but at that point, the marriage wasn't healthy, and abuse was then introduced into the relationship, and like hectic abuse, emotional, physical, mental, financial. So I was almost like a mistake, almost like I wasn't planned. I think I carried and I felt that rejection keenly, even as a baby.
Sure.
I didn't know it at the time as I grew up, but, you know, having discussions and reflecting, and God just really helping me heal. Essentially, he had to bring back certain parts of my past, and I really had to address certain things. So rejection became a very big part of my upbringing. And because I felt rejected by both my mom and my dad for different reasons, of course, it just had a very negative impact on me. You know, I had severe mental issues, anxiety, depression, low self-esteem. I hated myself because I just didn't think I was good enough. You know, I didn't think that anybody could love me in the way that I needed to be loved at that point. So I then went extremely rebellious because of it, because I was obviously trying to find attention that I couldn't get at home. You know, so I hung out with the wrong people. I did all the worst things that you can think of, like a poster child, rebellious black sheep of the family. You know, was addicted to alcohol and cigarettes and all sorts of vices, just as a cry for help. I was rebellious at school. I think my mom got called in every grade, every year. It was detentions, it was banking, you know, it was everything, like a problem child, in every way that you could think of. And I wasn't also maliciously trying to be a problem. It wasn't because I was trying to make my mom, you know, feel pain or anything like that. I just didn't know how to express how I was feeling. So these were like my outlets, you know. And every time I would find myself in these situations, I would feel bad, like genuinely. For me, it was just like, I can't help it. I just keep responding like this or behaving like this, and I don't know what to do with it, you know. And I felt like I was such a misunderstood child. I couldn't express myself, you know, I couldn't articulate the pain I was feeling because I didn't even understand it myself, you know. So I just felt like I was just worthless. And I just wanted my life to end so many times, repeatedly. And then you go through puberty and high school and that dynamic with friends, you know, self-image issues, body issues, the whole 9 yards, right? So my adolescence and childhood were really just horrible. Most of my memories are also just blocked out because of, I think, the mental trauma I experienced. But having said that, you know, there were still reinforcements of God. We went to church. Our home was filled with scriptures on our walls, you know, so I saw that daily. We knew what prayer was. We would pray every now and again. I would see my mom pray, you know, so I knew about God. I just didn't know him for myself. But that was enough to carry me, because a moment came where I had to make a choice, you know, and had to really just understand who God was for myself. And it came at a pivotal point because I was about to take my life at that point. So I had the choice. Do I want to take my life because I was just over it? Or do I want to keep living and find out what more is there to life. Because I always knew that there has to be more to life than just me living in this depressive state. There has to be. I had this hope in my spirit, however small that it was. And that decision had me encounter God in a radical way, you know, and I made the choice to keep going and to keep living. And I met him. You know, he reached me, he spoke to me. I can't describe exactly what happened, but it made sense to me. You know, when something is just packaged to reach you in a way that you will understand and you will respond to, and you will know that this is so much bigger than me, and this was a divine experience, you know, and it was forever imprinted in my mind. And I made a choice. I made a choice to keep living, but also in my living, I'm going to live differently. I'm going to live intentionally, you know, and I'm going to live for a purpose. And that choice began another string of choices thereafter. You know, it became one choice after another. I dropped the addictions. I dropped the friends. I dropped the vices, you know, and I just started making intentional, healthier choices. And adding all of those up has led me to where I am today. You know, but because of this desire in my heart to just be more than what I was, and to live a life that wasn't hopeless, but a life filled with hope, you know, but God just made me at that decision. And that's just really where I am right now.
Guys, if you can't tell, I'm in awe of this lady. Every single time she speaks or tells her story, it's just so awe-inspiring for me. Because not only does it speak of the mercy and kindness of God, but it also shows to what lengths Jesus is could go to reach you. You know, when we talk about Jesus's relentless pursuit, it's exactly that. He doesn't relent, he doesn't give up, he doesn't let go. You know, it is only up to us if we take that or if we don't. Like Karabo said, that she had a choice, you know, and she had to pick between, you know, taking her own life or giving her life to Jesus, you know. So ma'am, I'm so glad that you made that choice, because where would I be?
You'd be fine.
Oh my gosh.
It's so funny that you say that, actually, because you know, during COVID, so my encounter with God was during COVID.
Wow, that is like fresh. You realize?
Yeah, like 5 years, 6 years ago. And there was a cigarette ban and there was an alcohol ban. Right? And obviously those were the two things that I relied on to get me through life. And I remember even thinking that, God, could you have really orchestrated that entire ban just to reach me?
You know what? He did.
He did, right?
He really did.
That's the story I'm telling myself. That he could have literally organized that entire experience just so that I could stop and be still.
My word.
And listen to him.
My goodness.
Yeah.
He stopped a whole apocalypse.
A whole pandemic. Love it.
Oh my gosh. Wow, guys, I just cannot, you know, I just lose my words. But the whole thing of like, why do we want to bring people to this space? Remember that this podcast is about liberation. It's about us realizing how free we can be and what kind of freedom Jesus Christ has died for and purchased for us. And so I want my guests to portray that in their lives too, because I'm not going to bring here people who have not been brought by freedom. Or maybe if I do, maybe we can get to hear their side of the story of why it is they do not want to give in to this type of freedom. But this just gets to show you, when Jesus is about you, he doesn't play. You know, and when he delivers you completely. You know, like Garabo said, Garabo did a whole 360. I'm telling you, this was a whole turn. She said, I dropped addictions. You know, I dropped addictions. That is very big. And I thank God, because in your life, he shows you that there's no way you could have done that on your own. You know, that he keeps revealing that. So, yeah, guys, Garabo is remarkable, okay? So I get to watch her most of the time. She knows I'm always in her space.
She loves me, and I love her too.
I am in her space, okay? So I get to see her do a lot. And one of the things that she said she did was, she's in a discipleship ministry at our church, Fellowship City. And this one I get to see every week, okay? So Karabo literally took a syllabus and turned it 100% around. So the church is now teaching the discipleship space, like the kids learn Karabo's mastermind. She comes up with the whole curriculum. She came up, I'm telling you, she really did a whole thing. So Was this do you think that you've always had that? I mean, of course we know that God is the one that gives creativity.
Yeah.
And like you said, that you were drawn to the creative side of things.
Yeah.
And you love kids, you are a teacher of them, and you just love redoing, rebuilding their minds in the right ways. When it came to this part, you did mention that you're very particular. Like when God calls you to something, you go full head on. Tell me about
100%.
this part of like the discipleship journey with discipling young minds. Was that a dream ever? Or how did we get there? And when God calls you to it, what was happening? Yeah.
I think what I'm discovering about God, is that He has hidden inside of each and every one of us our destiny, our capacity, our identity, and our gifts. But the only way He can reveal those layers, and it's layers, it's not just one element or facet of who you are, but there's so many dynamics to an individual, because God, who is huge, made you in His image, so we carry that image in us, right? The vastness and the creativity and the just the immensity of God, we have a portion of that in all of us, right? And the only way that we can really start the journey of discovering all of our layers is to firstly say yes to Jesus, so accept Him as Lord over your life, because He made you, so only He can unlock that inside of you, right? So partnering with Him first is the first start of that, and to just continuously obey, like it's this blind faith almost, where even if you don't believe it, He knows what He put inside of you. Just agree to Him. And every time I have said yes to God, I promise you, in the last 5 years or 6 years, I have never regretted it, ever. And He has made me discover things about myself that I could have never come to the conclusion of in my own understanding. I would have been limited by my own fears, by my own belief about myself. So every time God really just says, you can do more, you can do more, just step in a little bit further, step out a little bit further. It's because He knows what He put inside of you, and it's huge. Like, I think it would scare us if we saw the full capacity of what our destiny looked like. We would probably say no to it because it's that big. But yes, just to basically answer your question, it's just that God has just been opening layers of my gifting, one obedience at a time, one surrender at a time. So children's ministry was never like fear again, but I also didn't think I was healthy enough to minister to children. Children are just so pure and so innocent, and I thought I was still a little bit fractured and tainted, and it wouldn't be pure. So I really just struggled with accepting and identifying with that calling. But this year changed everything for me. I feel like now I'm just flowing in this agreements and authority, and it looks good on me. I love it, honestly. But the reason that I feel like I agree with it now is because God finally revealed to me why He gave me this calling, is because my childhood was fractured. My childhood was really stolen from me. I have very little positive memories of my childhood. And God basically said, because He's a God of redemption and restoration, and He will use our own pain and past to redeem other people's stories.
That's good.
Right? So He said, because yours was so tainted, now that you have come into redemption with me, I want you to help other kids not experience childhood like yours. However, even if they're in a happy family, there's still trauma there. Trauma comes in many facets. It doesn't just look like broken households. So it really is from that. It's just to nurture and safeguard the mind of a child. And I can relate to that more than anybody, because I know what was stolen from me. And my passion is to make sure that a child doesn't experience what I had the disadvantage of experiencing, or advantage, depending on how you look at it now. But yeah, my passion is because of what my childhood looked like and what I want to do for a child growing up now, because a destiny of an individual is rooted in their childhood, right? The enemy knows this. He can taint and distort your destiny as a child, because you literally grow up viewing yourself in the lens of a childhood trauma, and you respond to life every single time based on that perception. So if I can just help kids know their identity at a young age, they're going to grow up to be fortified, courageous, confident adults, because their childhood is healthier.
That is so good.
Yeah.
You said so many things there, and my mind went, woo! Okay, so I had to come back and pick it up. But the most important thing I think for me right now standing out is you mentioned how God uses your traumatic experience to kind of help the other younger minds to come back from actually being misled in their identity at a young age so that they grow up healthier. Would you say that God would use every other person's humble beginnings to, or would you say, let me put it like this, would you say that the beginning of your story kind of tells what your destiny is?
100%. Because remember, when all of us are born, we are born with a destiny already written by God. Jeremiah tells us that before he formed us, he already knew us, right? He had our destiny, our plan, our purposes, our futures already documented and written down. Now, the enemy knows our destiny. So he will always make sure that he distorts it so you don't come into the fullness of who God has already written about you, a completed product, right? And we're always living now thinking we still have to build or work or belong. But God is like, I've already written a completed version of you. There's nothing you need to add or take away from it. But because fear is then planted as a child, because identity is distorted, we're always working against our destiny and not towards it. But you have proof, or there's almost like little markers of who God has called you to be as a child already. But the trauma attached to that will always make you run away from it and not towards it.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
It makes sense. Which takes me to my next question. And this one, I need you to give me a little bit more of an image. Like, a scenario would be someone grew up in a very perfect household. And I say perfect very loosely because I understand that nobody is perfect. But I mean perfect in the sense that healthy environment, very understanding parents. They teach, they allow you to see their mistakes and they allow you to question when they make mistakes. Like that type of healthy environment or family. Parents are still together, and they model a healthy, God-like family. And you still have a purpose, of course, because you're existing. What would be the key things then to look out for to figure your purpose out? Because I think the biggest thing that we all suffer sometimes is finding out what we were made for. So what advice would you give a child who was born perfectly and who feels like their childhood was perfect, but they're looking and searching for purpose? What in their life should they be zooming in on to find that?
I think authenticity is a very important one. In a world where everybody's trying to duplicate and copy everybody. And it's literally shoved in our faces. You see it on social media, you see it in movies, that this is what you must look like, this is what you must attain, this is what you must build, you must be married at this age, have kids. All of these perfect standards really go against how God authentically designed each and every one of us. So you're always living a life based on somebody else's framework and going against what God has for you ordained. So I think somebody who comes from a perfect home but is still struggling with purpose is because they are thinking their identity is in someone else or in something else or in somebody else's version of their life. And they're looking outside of them. And that's where the discomfort and the tension comes from. But if we fully understand that we were all created to be authentic in our gifting, so it has to look different. It cannot look the same. I cannot sound the same with somebody else. My gifting, even if we have the same gifting, it has to look different because no one person has the same fingerprint.
That's
right. We are so intrinsically different based on the design of God. But every time we want to conform, we move against our identity and not into it. So just to encourage being authentic and trusting what God has already placed inside of you. You're not thinking that you need to add or take away from it.
That is good. That is good. That is such a good answer. I have no other question after that. I have no other question after that. But seeing that like you said, your mom and your sister and your family, you guys are faith-based, and just in case you didn't notice that my background is different. We are at BBM, okay? So this is not my normal place of recording. So that's where we are. And I've watched you guys, I've listened to your mom, I've listened to your sister speak, and You're all remarkable in your own way. And your whole family, you guys are living by what the Word of God says, right? What would you say your relationship then was like in the house? You know, was it always, were you guys always this close? Or was there ever a time where you felt out of place with your family? Of course, there was a time where you were rebellious and stuff like that, you were struggling. And of course, maybe I can imagine there was tension there and not getting along. But ever since you guys took this route of building this foundation together and just following Christ, what has your relationship been like?
Sure. It has been safe, you know, it has been healthy. So I grew up in a home I was raised by a very strong, independent mom. Obviously, because of her trauma with abuse, she had to grow thick-skinned, you know, and it was obviously walls, hard. And she raised us that way. Maybe not consciously or intentionally, but that's literally what we grew up seeing a lot. Just a strong woman who didn't need a man, you know, who could get things done. Very outspoken, you know, very confident. And it obviously rubs off on you as a woman. I mean, for the longest time, I really didn't want to get married. I thought I didn't even have to have a child with a man. I would just go get a sperm donor and have a baby. Like, I was like, honestly.
This is news to me.
I was like, you don't need men, we're fine, we can do this alone.
Yeah, that's so funny.
But yeah, obviously because of how strong all of our personalities were, as a result of that, we did have a lot of conflict. You know, my mother and I, my mother and I, actually, our relationship was very strained for a very long time. Obviously, I was a rebel, so it was always me getting into trouble. But I also didn't talk a lot, so she didn't know what was going on inside of my head. I was very guarded. And yeah, just miscommunication. We didn't get each other. And that was just where the conflict came from, you know. So a lot of fights. I think we would have fights maybe once a month, and then we would not speak to each other for weeks. It was just a silent treatment. And then I don't know what would happen. It would fizzle out, and then it would happen again. You know, but I must say that so my radical transformation was a domino effect for my mom and then my sister. So they saw the change in my life and they're like, what is going on here? You know, and I started ministering to them because I was just like, guys, you don't even understand what just happened to me. You need to know this. And they also then gave their life to Jesus, and we all had a collective transformation at the same time. You know, it happened in the same measure, in the same way. Like, just God came over our household and changed us radically. And that really just influenced the dynamic of our relationship. Because now we are not accountable to each other, we're accountable to God first. So, I mean, we still have disagreements, that's never not going to happen. But now, instead of just having silent treatments that happen for weeks on end, I know, because I love Jesus, I have to do right by him. And because of that, I have to do right by my mom or my sister. You know, so my relationship with God is like this correction, convicting experience where he's like, you can't go to sleep until you make that right. You know, you can't go another day without, you know, asking for forgiveness or saying sorry. You know, so, and each of them go through that same thing as well. So we all have already an intimate relationship with God, and because that's possible, our relation is different. And that brings us back to redemption every time we have a disagreement. So much healthier, so much peace as well, because we're united, you know, in a way that we've never been before. And my nieces get to see a different version of family than how we grew up. You know, and that is just, you can see the fruit of that example in their life, in how they are growing up, and how they perceive the world, and how they make decisions, because the home is healthier. But they also see when it breaks, we always come back to the table and we make it right.
That is so good.
So yeah, definitely much better than what it was. 100%.
I love that. You see, guys, God does not do shortcuts, let me tell you. And it's almost like he has a system that he runs with, you know, even if he touches your life differently and he touches my life differently, but there's always most like an order of things that need to happen in order for the whole thing to be put together. Because the things that God was actually saying are the things that I've also recognized in my own life, you know, and the fact that you guys are all saved and God is like, okay, So this thing is broken, and I'm gonna channel you, and you, all in different spaces, but then you all have the same conviction to try to fix. I love that. He doesn't miss any pieces. Wow. It's just so much. I don't know what to say anymore, but thank you.
Oh gosh.
Thank you so much. I feel like there's just so much more that I want the people to know about you, you know.
We can have another episode if you want us to.
Possibly we could. But thank you so much for just taking the time to be here. I do have a last question.
Okay.
You said that as you had to let go of so many things, in your transformation, and when Jesus found you 5 years ago, and you had to let go of friends and people. What does that look like now? Is your family your only friends, or has God sent you? Because he does redeem, and if you sacrifice something, of course we know that we need friends at some point in our lives. What happens in that dynamic? Have you gotten friends? Is he giving you friends? Is he saying anything about filling that space, and who's in your corner?
Well, another thing that I learned about God, because remember I told you that I am just on this quest to learn and know the heart of God and the character of God, because people distort his character, and we often label God based on what people have showed us, and not necessarily that's his heart.
That's good.
So I'm always trying to discover God for myself, and one of the traits, one of many anyway, traits that I've discovered is that God really just is so genuinely invested in giving us a good life.
That's good. That is hashtag that.
That is his desire for all of us. When he said, I came to give you freedom, freedom looks like a full expression of a healthy, happy life.
Yes.
With no boundaries, and you don't feel like you're missing something because it's just available to you in a healthy way. And every facet of life forms part of that, friendships, relationships, entertainment, a social life, creativity, just watching a movie, listening to music, going out with friends. That all forms part of freedom. But God is just saying that do it on this side and not on that side. It's different on this side, and I've really experienced every facet of that. Honest to God. We used to have this thing, my sister and I, every Friday. We used to call it Vorsi night. So every Friday after work, we would have boerewors rolls and buy a big, what do you call that? Overmeer of wine. That boxed wine. Yeah. We used to call it every Friday without fail because we had a rough week at work and, just toxic corporate vibes, and we would just drink our sorrows. And we would live up to that. And when we gave our lives to Jesus, we were like, every day is Vorsi. Every day is Vorsi Friday, because you just get so much joy and peace, and you see God opening up, this door, this way of fun, and just enjoying life in a healthy way. So yes, I did lose friends, but I gained so much.
That's good.
I gained family, I gained friendships, I gained sisters and brothers, and it's almost overwhelming sometimes because you don't even recall how did this happen, but you just find yourself in spaces where you're like, hold on, this is safe, this is healthy, this happened. I did pray for it as well, because there was a time that I was like, okay, there has to be more to life than just my little safe bubble. There has to be more to life. I mean, me and my sister are very close. She's always been in my corner, even while I was a broken child, and my mom as well. Our relationship is a lot better and healthier. So that was enough until it wasn't, until I wanted a different type of experience and dynamic. And I prayed for that, and he really has put people in my life who pour into me, who encourage me, who motivate me. It took a very long time for me to allow and receive it,
I can imagine,
because I was very guarded, but I was also trying to protect my relationship and walk with God, because I was fearful that any friendship would take me back.
Sure.
And I don't want to go back.
Yeah.
So I'm like, no, I will keep it here just in case you want to do things that I don't want to be doing, type of thing. But just God also showed me that wasn't freedom.
Yeah.
So definitely he has put people in my life who pray with me, who do life with me. We speak the same language. It just flows. And like I'm not missing out on anything. And that's another lie that Christianity seems to tell a lot of people, that if you choose Jesus, you miss out on the fun of life.
Like you're not fun.
Yes, you're boring. Like it's better on that side. And I literally cannot even agree to that. And as somebody who's done every possible thing you can think of, I miss none of it. This is literally the fullness of life for me, in every way, in every facet. Yeah, so yes, Christian friendships are a real thing. I am part of that. I experience it. Here's one of them. Here's one of my friends. And it's a beautiful thing if you also open yourself up to be in a space where people can love you, journey with you, pray with you, encourage you. It's a really sacred experience. And I mean, Jesus had friends, and he loved his friends. There are very few parts where he talks about family, but you see a lot of reference of friends and friendship. I mean, he called Judas his friend, so friendship is a big deal to God. Even I think there's even a proverb that says a friend is more genuine or deeper than a brother or a sister, because friendships closer, right? Because friendships are chosen. Now, family is blood. That's your blood. You don't have a choice in that. But friendships are actually relationships that you actively choose to do a life journey with. And that's sacred and it's special. Yeah,
that is so good. You said so many good things. I am like Karabo, I'm very biased when it comes to Jesus. I don't want to lie. I'm learning to become, because like I said, my journey is also fresh with Christ. It's not fresh because I've been saved for a very long time, but I am now, like I said when I started this recordings, that it is the most I've ever done to out myself as a Christian. So it is the most liberating, because I've never felt so alive. And surely we're not missing anything. We are not missing it. He literally has every facet of our lives checked. What I wanted to say to you guys is that Karabo mentioned it. She said when she felt like there was a lack and a dynamic of her life was starting to change, she asked. Ask wherever you are, wherever you are in your life and whatever you're doing. Ask. God is not out of reach. Whether you had a relationship with him or whether you don't, whether this is your first time hearing about him or whether you've known him for all your lives, ask. He's never not going to answer you, because he's always waiting for you to ask. He's always waiting for you to say something directed to him. And I'm just so grateful that we get to explore this part. I'm so grateful that we get to learn about him, and he shows us who he is every single time. In my last video, I mentioned how God has so much for us to explore about him, and that he's not just on some basic level. And this is just one of the ways in which God does that. He is very, very particular about every single moment of your life. And I mean moment. I mean from the moment you take a breath and you decide you're going to say something next, he's invested in all of that. And it's so very nice to know that I'm not the only one saying all these things. Karabo is not the only person saying all these things. And there are millions and millions of people around the world who've experienced the love of God. And I just feel and pray that you also get to taste that type of freedom, because it truly is freedom. That's what freedom really looks like. Truly. And I just pray that this episode blessed you, and I pray that you will seek out that freedom yourself as well, and that after listening you will just go in your corner and ask, Holy Spirit, meet me. Meet me here. I don't have words to say, but meet me. You've done it for Karabo, you've done it for Lerato. Show me how I can, live for you, or how I can let you in my life. It doesn't matter what you've gone through, doesn't matter who hurt you, and you are his first priority. But he needs to know that you want him. He's not invasive, he's not abusive, he's intentional and gentle. He will wait for that question, he will wait for that remark, he will wait for that invitation. But it has to come from you. Thank you so much for joining us, Karabo. You guys already know. You can see Moss. Thank you. Thank you for doing this with me. And she was one of the encouragements. If you could see my first video, she took it. So it's really great. Thank you so much for supporting me, encouraging me. I think when this journey happened, I complained to you so many times, that I'm struggling with this part. But thank you for allowing God to use you in my life, in the ways that you have so far, and I'm excited for what God is going to do in yours.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the ways in which He's opening you up,
Yeah.
And letting your guard down.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for joining us here at Uncapped Podcast. She actually edited the first video. So
I
She did.
created the first thumbnail.
Oh my gosh!
I
And even the emblem you see, the
The
podcast logo that you
Yeah.
see there, she did that.
I just started
You know?
and she took it over.
Yeah, this girl's crazy.
She was a
She is a
natural.
creative for real. She's a creative for real, and I'm so excited. Guys, thank you for watching. Please do
Bye,
not
guys.
forget to subscribe, to like, to comment, and to share this video if it touched or did anything to you and for you. I'm looking forward to the next one. And until next time, bye.
Bye.